everyone, welcome to JM Simply. So today I want to share about getting started in crochet, and we're going to talk about the tools you need to crochet. So the only things that you really need to crochet is a hook and a yarn. If you have no idea where to start, you can just grab a yarn that you like and use the reference for the hook on there. Another way is if you find a pattern you really like. Most patterns will say the kind of yarn you need based on size and a hook to use for that, because that kind of factor into that. I know for amigurumi, they usually use a smaller hook than the hook size recommended on the yarn. Like the hook yarn I typically use usually recommends a 5.5 millimeter or 6. I typically will use a 3.5. I used to use a 2.5, but I kind of prefer the 3.5. Yeah, so next we have something that you do need, but it can be very open in what it is. You basically need a sharp object or something that can cut your yarn. I do know if you use some natural fibers, they're a bit looser, they could probably pull them apart. I use mostly acrylics, mainly because it's the most available to me, and I've been gifted a ton of yarn. So I can't really just pull apart acrylics, but you can use just about anything to really cut your yarn. Like I said, grab a little piece of cheap kid scissors, cuts yarn. So you can use a blade of any kind, just pin your yarn with the point you want to cut between your fingers, and voila, you cut yarn. You can even use nail clippers to do this. Like, you need just something that can cut. So with the nail clippers, just slip them right in there, and it cuts. Just about anything can be used to cut your yarn. Just has to be something that can cut stuff. So another important thing that is very useful, if not always, what many people label as a necessity, is a tapestry needle. If you can't get a hold of a tapestry needle, you can also get one of the really small sized hooks, because the tapestry needle is often used to weave things in, and you can use a small hook for that. You just need to make sure it's significantly smaller than the original needle so it can slip through the stitches a lot easier. Tapestry needle or a very small hook to weave in your ends. And I do know that if you're doing amigurumi, sometimes it's even easier than that. The only issue with using a tiny hook for doing amigurumis is if you loop it through, sometimes you can pull out the stuffing when you try to pull out the thread. But I have done it with a tiny crochet hook. So we're going to talk about some nice things that can make it a lot easier, especially depending on what you do. I know I primarily crochet amigurumis, so for me a stitch counter is a must-have, because I need to keep track of my rows when you do so many rows, and it really can matter, and sometimes the rows can be a bit harder to count, especially when you're doing all that other stuff and keeping track of everything. So a stitch counter, I use this to count rows, but it can be used for counting multiple different things when it comes to doing stuff. So another very nice thing to have are stitch markers. I have these little like safety pin looking stitch markers. They make all different kinds. I prefer these kind. But if you do not have stitch marker and you do find that they would be very useful, you can use a safety pin. You can use a bobby pin. Bobby pins might be a bit trickier because they might slip out, but you can use a bobby pin. You can use loose thread, extra yarn. You can use a paper clip, just anything that you can loop into that area or tuck in there. you can use to count your stitches if you need a stitch counter. I was gifted a massive bag of stitch counters, and I love using them for what I do, especially amigurumis. They become extremely useful in keeping track of where your row starts and ends. Pretty much the main things that you really need to crochet. I know a lot of people recommend getting a crochet light. I don't have one. I do want to get one because it would be useful in many other places. But to make it easier to see when you're in different areas. And yeah, but that's pretty much all you really need to start crocheting. And again, you can always start with a pattern or you can get into that. And I do want to cover a video about the basics of stitches that you need to know to crochet. So, but yeah, there you go. So you can get your tools and get started. Just find the crochet hook you want. I know I got this crochet hook set. It came with, I'm trying to remember all it came with. It came with several needles in millimeters. I only use millimeter references for my crochet hooks, so I have no idea the other references. It came with a thing of measuring tape, which can also be extremely useful when you're crocheting. I don't find it as useful because I do primarily amigurumis, but when you're doing like blankets or garments or anything like that, a measuring tape can be very useful. And it comes with these really nice enclosed scissors. So, and it came with the case. If you want to know which one this is, I have no idea. I bought it several years at like Hobby Lobby or Joann's, and I fell in love with the set, so I haven't bought any new ones. So, but yeah, you can buy one crochet hook based on either the pattern you want to do, because they may have a recommended crochet hook and size of yarn. You can do it based on the yarn they use, the size recommended for the yarn. Just like you can just grab one crochet hook. You can get a pretty good crochet hook for very little. And then some yarn. And yarn can range in being super expensive to being very, very inexpensive. I know me and my husband prefer to get the acrylic Karen pounder, 1-pounder yarns, because it gives a good amount for the value you get. And it just happens to be one of our preferred. Again, I primarily use acrylic yarn because for the most part I buy from like Joann's and Michael's and stuff like that, because I've never had a whole lot when it comes to spending on it. And also, I don't really buy a lot of yarn either because I just had a ton gifted to me that I've been going through. But yeah, no, it does not take much to get started, and you can get started and do amazing things with very little. Anyways, thank you guys for coming in. Yeah, have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your day. Bye.